The settlers that came to America built a new life in a new land, but they were still ruled by the King of England and his Parliament. King George III taxed the colonists and made them live by his laws. Many colonists didn't like the way England ruled them, but if they protested against the king, they would be stopped by British soldiers. Then, in 1773, the king decided that only one company could send tea to the colonists, and he put heavy tax on it. That was the last straw! The colonists were so angry that they threw all the tea into the Boston Harbor. It was called the Boston Tea Party. The British government ordered its troops to take swift action against the rebels. The colonists weren't ready to go to war with England, but they got ready, fast. They formed a Continental Congress and voted to organize an army and navy, naming George Washington commander-in-chief. King George III sent soldiers to force the colonists to obey his laws and pay him taxes. When they got here in April of 1775, war came with them. The colonists wanted to fight to be free from England, and they fought many battles. On July 4th, 1776, the leaders of those 13 colonies issued the Declaration of Independence. A new flag was made that had 13 stars and 13 stripes to represent each of the colonies. There were more battles, many more battles. Some were won by the colonists, and some were won by the British. Fortunately, the Prime Minister of Spain decided to help the colonists and sent soldiers to fight the British. France came to help too. Finally, after 6 long years of war, George Washington led the final battle in Yorktown and forced England to surrender. The soldiers got to go home and didn't have to live under King George III anymore. England was out, the United States were in. The colonists were very happy. For a while, the 13 colonies acted like their own individual countries, and this caused a lot of problems. They couldn't agree on borders. Each state had its own money, and some states wouldn't take money that was printed in other states. There weren't any clear rules. The country needed some kind of government to hold them all together. A meeting was scheduled on May 14th, 1787, and delegates came from every state for a grand convention, except for Rhode Island. They met in the State House in Philadelphia. George Washington was named president of the convention. Altogether, there was 55 delegates coming and going, but there were seldom more than 30 in a meeting at the same time. It turned out to be a very hot summer. The men worked at tables draped with green woolen cloth. They didn't want anyone eavesdropping, so they kept the windows closed. There were noisy horse-drawn carriages outside, so the State spread straw on the cobblestone streets to make them more quiet. It was going to be a long, hot 4 months before they got their work done. Some of the delegates at the convention were well known, and you may even know some of their names, but they were all important to the process of writing the Constitution, and they all had names. James Madison, first to arrive, never missed a day, wrote down everything that happened. Abraham Baldwin, Alexander Hamilton, Alexander Martin, Caleb Strong, Daniel Carroll, Daniel of St. Thomas Stanford, David Brearley, Edmund Randolph presented the Virginia Plan. George Mason, George Reed, George White, Gunning Bedford, Hugh Williamson, George Washington was named president of the convention. Jacob Broome, James McClurg, James McHenry, John Blair, John Dixon, John Francis Mercer, John Langdon, Luther Martin talked Benjamin Franklin to sleep, John Lansing, Jonathan Dayton, Nathaniel Gorham, Charles Cotesworthy Pinckney. Benjamin Franklin was the oldest and most colorful delegate. Nicholas Gilman, Charles Pinckney, Oliver Ellsworth, Richard Bassett, George Clymer, Elbridge Gerry, a.k.a. Grumbletonian, George Mason, Richard Dobbs Pate, Roger Sherman, Robert Yates. James Wilson, Rufus King, Jared Ingersoll, John Rutledge, Samuel Johnson, William C. Houston, Pierce Butler, Thomas Fitzsimmons, Gouverneur Morris was called the Tall Boy of the Convention, William Blount, William Few, Thomas Mifflin, William Lee Pierce, William Livingston, William Richardson Davie, Robert Morris. William Patterson was only 5'2". He was a very modest, likable man, but he fought with James Madison against the Virginia Plan. These men discussed all the things they would need to do, and it wasn't always easy. Sometimes they would disagree on their ideas. Sometimes they would even argue. Actually, there was a lot of arguing. Eventually, they agreed to adopt the Virginia Plan. This meant there would be 3 branches of government. The executive branch would have the head who would be responsible for running the government. The legislative branch would be made up of 2 houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Together they would be called Congress. The 3rd branch would be the judiciary. It would be headed by the Supreme Court that would make sure all the laws were constitutional, that they were all properly obeyed. But the discussions didn't stop there, and neither did the arguing. How would the small states be treated compared to the larger ones? How would they decide on a person to be the head of the government? If there was only one person, would he be seen as a king? How long would that person serve, and what would they do if he did a bad job? Would the common people have too much or too little power? How could they make everyone be equal? Would the colonies become a nation? There were lots of nuts and bolts to work out. The delegates kept trying day after day, week after week, to reach an agreement. In the end, they were able to compromise and make decisions. On September 8, 1787, the Constitution was sent to a committee to be written in the final form. 4 days later, it was presented to the delegates. George Washington said that it was a little short of a miracle. The opening statement explains why the new rules were written. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. The Constitution is the system of the fundamental laws and principles that prescribe the nature, functions, and limits of our government. In other words, it tells exactly what job each part of our government has and what it can do. 39 of the 55 delegates signed the official document. On June 21, 1788, North Carolina was the 9th state to ratify the Constitution. With this vote, the United States of America officially became a nation. It took nearly 2 more years for the other 4 states to join. But all over the country, a lot of people believed the Constitution was missing something very important. In 1791, 10 amendments were added to the Constitution. It is an official list of our rights as American citizens. 1. Protects your religious freedom and your right to free speech. 2. Protects your right to own a gun. 3. Says the government can't force you to let soldiers stay in your home during peacetime. 4. Protects you from being searched unless the government can prove there's a good reason to believe you've committed a crime. 5. Says the government must follow the certain rules when it accuses someone of a crime. 6. says that a person accused of a crime has the right to a speedy and fair trial. 7 says that you have the right to a jury trial. 8 says that you have the right to reasonable bail if you are arrested, and you can't receive cruel or unusual punishment if you are convicted of a crime. 9 protects the rights that are not listed on the Constitution. 10 tells us that anything the Constitution doesn't say that Congress can do should be left up to the states or the people. If you'd like to learn more about the Constitution, check out these books at your local library. Shh! We're Writing the Constitution by Jean Fritz, illustrated by Tommy DePalla. A New True Book, The Constitution, by Patricia Ryan Query. The U.S. Constitution and You, by Silas Sobel, illustrated by Denise Gilgannon. And We the Kids, illustrated and forwarded by David Catrow.